Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Adrian Reed, and a very warm welcome to this BA Community webinar. I'm really pleased to say that we're joined today by Jennifer Bedell, and we're going to be talking about a really, I think, important topic, which Jen, this has caused a bit of a storm on LinkedIn because I just put a post about, about the title of this webinar with change management, business analysis, where where is the line, is there a line type of thing, and it seems to have created all sorts of really interesting conversations. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this, Jen.
Well, thank you for having me. It certainly is a topic.
Yeah. And for those of you tuning in, a little bit about Jen. So Jen's presented internationally at many conferences. So I've met her at conferences. Excellent speaker. Very sort of experienced in the business analysis change management world as well. So do be sure to connect with Jen on LinkedIn. Well worth staying in touch. And for those of you tuning in live also, just before we get started with the main content, I wanted to let you know about the mural board. So some of you that have been on these sessions before will be familiar with the format. I'm just going to put it up on the screen before I share the link. So there is a shared mural board. So you'll see over here, I have it on my other screen. I will put the link in the chat in a moment. So first of all, on the right-hand side, you've got links to connect with us if you'd like to. There's some other links hidden away, like little Easter eggs on the board as well. But the main purpose is to make notes, collectively make notes. And so when Jen says something that you think's interesting, if you just double-click, you can create a little sticky note and add your points, your idea or point or whatever, and then by the end of it, we'll have a summary of notes, and I will put those on LinkedIn, so you can take a look. You can also get really creative. There's all sorts of other tools if you want to use icons and stuff, then do. That's always really cool. So what I will do, let me just put the mural link in the chat. Just bear with me 1 second. So you shouldn't need to sign in with this mural link. If it does ask you to sign in, just let me know in the Q&A, because that means I will have shared the wrong link, but there we go. So take a look at that and have a play with it as we go along. So change management, Jen, really interesting topic. And I suppose the first question I should start with is, what is change management? And I mean, I know we could use the whole 60 minutes talking about that one topic, but how would you describe it?
I think in short words, it's the people side of change. But it's funny that we say it's not a simple answer. I was having a conversation with the change management practice lead at my company, and we were talking about how would you describe it? And really, there's so much to it. But I think what it all comes down to is it is that people side of the change. So change management is that piece that kind of walks along beside the project, even maybe getting ahead of some of the other parts of the project, to basically prepare the way for everybody else, making sure that everybody involved knows what's coming, and they're also there a little beyond the project afterward to make sure that adoption is met and that it sticks, that the change is sticking.
Yeah, so it ensures. So I mean, I really like what you said there about it being the people side, and you said something like it prepares the way, it clears the way. And I think in pictures, and I don't know if this will resonate with you, and I don't even know what the sport's called. It's an Olympic. It's like the Winter Olympics. Is it curling, where they've got the on the ice, and they have someone who goes with like what appears to be a broom. and it's like they're seeing where the thing's coming, and they're preparing the way. Is it kind of like that? It's kind of this, preparing the way so the thing smoothly goes to its destination.
Yeah, exactly. Another analogy being from Canada is we think of it as a snowplow.
Okay, yeah.
So, because if you think about it, as business analysts, how often do you go into a stakeholder meeting and you have to explain to everybody the purpose of the project, why they're there, and that eats into the time that you could be focusing on elicitation, focusing on what you're there for. So having a change manager who's already gone in and had those conversations, has them already, you basically get to run in and hit the ground running.
Yeah, that kind of hitting the ground running. And so, I mean, the next question I was planning to ask, we've probably slightly touched upon, but it is the sort of why is it needed? And, so to some extent, it's that people side. It's about clearing the way. You also mentioned it's there in embedding and making sure that change actually sticks. But why else would you say it's such an important discipline?
Well, if we think about it, when we are working on a project, we're introducing some type of change. What's the whole purpose behind it? The purpose is to achieve some kind of result, quite often financial. If that change is not adopted, if that change doesn't stick, then you've not met your goals. So it's really essential to ensure that change is going to stick. So, I mean, as business analysts, everyone on the project has a place in change management.
Yeah.
But having that separate change manager, of course, is going to make it that much more successful.
Yeah. And in terms of, I mean, I'm sure we'll move on and talk a little bit more about business analysis as well in a moment. And by the way, for those of you attending live, do feel free, if you have questions, if you pop them in the Q&A window, and we'll cover as many of them as we can as we go along. But what I was wondering, Jenn, is do you think change management differs by context? So, I was thinking, is it different in, say, a government context to a financial services company to a startup? Or are there sort of shared traits that are relevant in any context?
I think a little of both. I think there would be some shared traits in that. I mean, you're approaching it in a similar way. You're looking for the culture of that company. So maybe it's not so much different by industry, but possibly by company culture. So there may be a company that is well-versed and ready and good at accepting change. You may approach that a little bit differently than someone who's maybe never really experienced a change, and this might be their first big change. So definitely by company culture.
Yeah. That's really interesting, and I suppose that leads me to think about, what if there is a situation where there's a really big change coming? So, something which, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because often things which don't sound big to the people planning the change are actually really big, have a really big impact on the people that are going to be impacted by that change. Something as simple as saying, we're not going to use paper forms anymore might sound really, really beneficial. But if, for folks that are used to paper forms or, dealing with paper, that might be a really big deal. So, I mean, if it was a change that's going to change the way that folks work and potentially even require that, that it might even lead to a different culture, like what steps could a change manager or someone doing change management take? I suppose what I'm wondering, Jenn, as we're talking here, is to what extent would we as BAs say it overlaps with stakeholder participation, stakeholder engagement? Is there that natural overlap there, would you say?
There's a lot of overlap, and that's a great example, the stakeholder engagement, stakeholder analysis piece of it. Because one of the first things that we're doing as business analysts is identifying our stakeholders. Well, one of the first things a change manager does is identify their stakeholders. but we are looking at it a little bit from a different lens. So as a business analyst, we're looking at those stakeholders and looking at what do we need from them? How are we going to define requirements? How are we going to kind of involve them in the project? Where the change manager is looking at them and saying, how is this going to impact them? What kind of obstacles might they face? What do we need to do to make this easier for them? What else do they need to know? So they're the same people, but we're approaching them in different ways and for different purposes.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess it's about having that understanding the context, understanding the stakeholder landscape, and knowing how and when to engage.
Right.
So what would you say, Jen? Would you say, if you think about change management, would you say, like, who does it in your experience? Is it a role? Is it a person? Is it a discipline? Is it a team? Could it be any one of those things?
It could be any one of those things. It's
Good answer.
it's going to depend on the project. I mean, I think most of us have worked on a project that doesn't have a designated change manager. And that's probably fair to say.
Yeah, definitely.
In which case, I mean, everyone is pitching in and trying to manage that change, and then somewhere around the end of it, somebody says, "Oh, should we track adoption?"
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's usually how it goes, right? But then when you have that change manager, of course, you're going to have to work together to make sure you're not kind of bumping into each other. You need to complement each other, but they're thinking about that adoption tracking right from the beginning. On the same note, though, although the change manager kind of has that ultimate responsibility, we are all change agents, right? We're all part of ensuring that change is going to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, isn't it, Jen, that actually, even if there is a designated role, that actually, you know, change is an inherently human endeavor. It can't just rely on one person. It requires the coordinated efforts of a whole bunch of people, and we're all practitioners of change, whatever, you know, whether the title is business analyst, project manager, or whatever. So let's have a look at some of the questions that are coming in. So Vikesh says, so I had a different understanding of change management. Do you agree that larger or more process-driven companies have change management teams? I mean, I think they certainly do, but what would your view on that be?
I think we're starting to see more and more of that in larger companies. But I think even so, a lot of times companies may think of change management as communication and training. All we have to do is tell them about it and train them, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we're starting to see more and more companies recognizing the need for that enterprise level change management.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And beyond the sort of tell and sell approach, you know, just tell them it's happening and convince them it's a good idea, which is, you know, perhaps not a very realistic, but you know, kind of an old school approach. So thinking about change management and business analysis, because I'm sitting here as a business analyst thinking there's a lot of similarity about what we've been talking about here and what a good BA would be doing. But there's probably also some differences or a different perspective on change. So in your experience, how is it different and how is it similar from business analysis?
So I want to start by saying when I first had a conversation with somebody who had been working in change management more formally, so I'd been doing some change management, but not, my title was business analyst. And it was only after I had this conversation that I realized, well, hey, I guess I've been doing change management all this time. I think we agreed probably 70% of what we do as business analysis on a lot of projects could also fall under change management. So similarities in that we're all working toward the same goal. We're all looking for being able to deliver some type of improvement or change, preferably an improvement, to our stakeholders. And so again, it's really, when I've had this conversation and thinking about some of the things I've been doing, such as meeting with the stakeholders, explaining to them what the benefits are, what some of the challenges might be as they move along, some of the things they need to think about, process changes, working with the training team to make sure that we've got training available. So thinking about making sure everybody is aware and knowledgeable of the change that's coming. These are things I think we inherently do as BAs.
Yeah.
That a lot of that now, when you've got a change manager role on the team, they can pick up a lot of that so that we can focus on the project and the delivery itself.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, it's like that, the complementary roles, and perhaps it could fall in a BA's remit. But if there's a specialist there, a specialist change manager, then there's that collaboration between the two, and actually that means that we can be focused, they can be focused, and and the project is sort of kept on the rails type of thing. So I suppose that means, Jen, that there needs to be a close collaboration between BAs and change managers to say, okay, well, you're going to look at specifying the training and figuring out how the training and the communications are going to work. We're going to look at how for example, we're going to look at how the processes are going to work, but that's going to have to feed into the comms and the training, because if we change the processes, that's going to mean that the training and the comms need to change. So it's like a dynamic, isn't it? That a change over here affects a change over here, and vice versa. So any tips on how that collaboration can work?
And that's a tricky one, right?
Yeah,
We want to, it's going to be different for every project. I was talking with one person who was working with a change manager, and they had to have quite a few discussions in the beginning to decide who's going to take care of training.
yeah,
Right? On one project, it might be the change manager, but on another, it might make more sense for it to be the business analyst. If they're the ones that are working with the requirements, and they're the ones that are understanding and working with the teams to build the product, they're going to know more about how it works and might be better suited to work with the training team.
yeah, yeah.
Or maybe you both do.
So
Right?
so again, which again shows that element of the similarity and the opportunity to collaborate, and actually there's no one size fits all approach to this stuff. It's about understanding the context and understanding who's best suited, who's closest to the situation. So
yeah.
Interesting. So let's look at some of the questions and comments that are coming in. So Stefan says, I believe a BA should also be interested in the impact of the change on stakeholders and what is needed for them to adopt to the change. But he agrees very few BAs look at stakeholders in that way. And yeah, and it's a good point, isn't it? Often as BAs, we think about, well, how can we get the information we need from these stakeholders? We don't necessarily think, how are we going to ensure that these stakeholders get what they need out of it, and therefore they adopt the change and we get the sort of benefits out.
Right.
And Jason asks, what would you say to key stakeholders who believe that communication and training is enough for change management? How would you convince them that more is needed, and what would that be? That's a really great and big question.
That is a huge one. I would probably, personally, my mind instantly goes to the ADKAR model, and I know that's not the only change management methodology out there, but I think that, because it's something quick to remember. Are they aware of it? Well, there's your communication. Do they want it? So if the communication and training is all that's given, how do we know that they're going to accept it? How do we know they're going to adopt it?
Yeah.
So it's really measuring how ready they are for that change, using whatever tools you have at your disposal.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because often we talk about the speed that change can be deployed. And that's important, right? You know, the speed at which, you know, the velocity of the Scrum team or whatever, for example, you know, and I'm not, well, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing to be talking about, but the pros and cons of that would be a different discussion. But actually, rarely does someone say, how quickly can we absorb the change? Like, and actually, are people happy with regular, you know, with, you know, for this group of affected stakeholders, would they prefer lots of incremental change over a period of time? Or actually, would just learning a big step change once be better for them? Which is kind of an interesting question, isn't it? Because, you know, there are probably some situations where people would, like, I'm just guessing here, but like if I was in a hospital and there was an electronic patient record system, I wouldn't want someone to be, oh my God, there's a new feature. Where do I find the blood type? Like, you just wouldn't want that, would you? Right? You know, so actually, you'd probably want very, very measured releases. Whereas if you were in like on a website, then it's kind of, you know, it's probably more, you know, more context dependent. So, yeah. So I guess again we come back to context, Jen.
We do, and we've got to remember too that change is not only technical. And I'll give you an example where even a positive change and a tiny change can throw you off. Now, I have always described myself as somebody who embraces change. I love change. I love new, different things, right? I've got a whole new desk set up since COVID hit because I just wanted something different. So last week, I was sitting and I thought, I don't like the way I'm sitting. I'm gonna move my monitors a bit. I'm gonna put this monitor over here and this one over here. And oh, this is a much better space. I love it. It took me a day and a half to get used to it. Even though it was a tiny, small change that I wanted, it's a much better setup.
Yep.
Very much a positive change. My decision, my idea. It still took a day and a half to get used to it.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we as change practitioners sometimes forget, isn't it? That actually, when the change is, when we put a mirror up to ourselves and think about how we, and you know, we work in change. I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but there was a time when I was commuting to work every day by train, and I'm super early. I was always on a very early train, and I live near the beginning of the train line, so it was normally pretty empty, and I sat in the same seat every morning because you just get into a routine. And one day there was someone sitting there, and I was like, you know, like my first reaction was like, who the hell are you? And why are you? And I'm like, hang on a minute, like chill, because it's not your train. Like, you don't own this train, and it's just a seat, right? But you have that whole, right. And you think, well, if you know, if you have that slight, albeit, you know, a very quick reaction and change curve to something like a seat on a train, moving something that seems small, like moving someone's desk in an office, actually, if they've worked with the same people for 10 years, that could be huge. You know, that could have a huge impact on their work life. So I suppose what I'm wondering, Jen, is like a lot of this, it sounds like, is the human side, the people side, and probably about the psychology of change as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, most of the change managers I know seem to have a psychology background. Maybe they've got a psychology major in university.
Yeah.
But they're interested in the people and the psychology behind it. So there's definitely a big component there.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as let me just put up a spreadsheet here and add some rows and columns and here you go, here's your change, right? It's being able to have the right conversations and advise, give the right advice.
Yeah.
Because that's another big thing too, is that the change manager isn't the one introducing the change. The change manager is working with the executives and the leadership to help them introduce and champion the change.
You see, again, that's really interesting, Jen, because one of the things I've often thought we do as BAs is we almost cultivate situations where others can take the credit. And most BAs I know are like, I'm totally fine with that. I like, if someone else if something is successful and I've had input to that, I don't need the limelight. I'm quite happy for, and virtually every other BA I've met have actually been like that. Actually, most of us don't really like the limelight, right? We
I do.
Well, yeah, maybe there's a few of us, but so actually, what it's not about us. It's like I sometimes think we channel. I mean, to use a bit of a crass analogy, but we're like a medium channeling stuff. But it's the business or the sponsor that owns it. We're just like the conduit for all of this stuff. So I'll just bring in a comment from Karen here. And Karen, thank you for this. This is awesome. So Karen says tools like the following, and then she lists, and I'll read these out because it's an excellent list: individual change model, readiness assessments, communications plans, sponsor roadmaps, coaching plans, training plans, resistance management. That's one I've not heard of. That's really interesting. And reinforcement mechanisms. So, I mean, great. I mean, anything you'd add to that? That sounds like a really comprehensive list.
That's fantastic. Maybe risk management, which might be your resistance management.
Yeah. I see. Right. Yeah. I like a force field analysis. People resistance, I suppose. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So then Steve asks about if you have a project where change is needed. Or how do you have a project where change is needed and not get input from stakeholders and the staff that will be responsible for performing after the change? So I suppose I think the essence of Steve's question here is what if you've got a change that is necessary, but for some reason there is an inhibitor to actually getting input from those people. Is change management still possible if you can't get input from them for some reason?
So I guess if the change is something that has to happen, somebody has to have made a decision, and maybe it was a governmental decision, maybe it's legislative, but if it has to happen, then that's even more need for a change manager really to get in there and starting with leadership and start to break down some of those resistances, start to break down some of those barriers.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? And Steve, if you're still tuned in, if you want to, if you can maybe add a little more detail around that specific scenario, that might be useful, because if there's, I suppose it's because I agree, if it's an imposed change, often they're the least popular, aren't they? Right? You actually need mostly nobody. I don't think I've ever met anyone that's gone, oh, excellent, there's a data protection change. Fantastic. Well, we're really, I just can't wait to specify every way that our data is processed and everywhere it's stored, and do a data readiness assessment. But it's a necessary thing to do, of course, an important thing.
Right.
So Michelle asks, how can you measure the change capacity of your organization? We're used to resourcing a portfolio of projects from an IT resource perspective, but we typically don't estimate business effort required. Wow, that's really interesting, isn't it? That's really interesting.
Yeah, and again, the change managers coming in focusing on that specifically, right? So like I said, the change management that I've done was more informal. So at Mariner, the company that I work for, we have a 3-day change management training program, certification program, where you can kind of learn some of these different things. But definitely, like looking at the capacity for change, obviously is from a different lens from what a business analyst is going to be looking at.
Yeah.
But that's going to help you decide how to approach that change. Is it something where I've got to put a lot more effort on that promotion of the change, on maybe some individual conversations, versus, okay, well, these guys are open and ready for it, so we can go a little bit lighter on that side.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I sometimes wonder whether there's almost some kind of sentiment analysis that we could do, a different, like putting a prod into the stakeholder world and say, well, how are they feeling about it right now? You know, and you know, and is everything moving in the right direction? And you could start to get a sense of whether they're ready to absorb the change, and if not, you know, some sort of estimate for how much additional communication or training or whatever is necessary. But of course, in reality, that single probe doesn't exist, or not, or if it does, the person that finds it will probably be a millionaire.
And I mean, some of it comes through using the same tools we use as business analysts, right?
Yeah.
You might have some interviews, some focus groups, even some surveys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you've got that survey written in such a way, you've got the right questions asked and you've got the right options for answers, you can get a lot from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Well, this is the midway point, so I'm going to do that absolutely terrifying thing for me. In that,
Okay.
on my other screen over here, I've got the mural set up, and I can't really see it. But what I will do is I will share it, and we'll see what people have been writing. So I will.
So this means I have to put my glasses on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I need to. So if you've just joined, I'll put the link to this mural in the chat afterwards. Wow, there's a lot on there. So ready for accepting change. Some companies can't deal with small change. Dedicated change manager, always embrace change. Add car. Like a snowpat, and someone's put a little Canadian flag. That's beautiful. Change managers are working with executives and leaders. Yeah, training who is best suited. Don't mess with Adrian's seat on the train.
Love it.
Well, if you take one thing away from this session, let it be that. So yeah, so as a reminder to those of you who are attending live, I'll put a PDF version of this on LinkedIn after the session, so you can see a link to Jenn and my LinkedIn profiles on the right. So do hit us up there and follow us. And I will just put just in case anyone joined late or didn't join at the very beginning, I will just pop a link to that mural in the chat for you all, just in case you want to take a look at it. And do keep adding those nuggets, because they're always good to see. So let's have a look at some more of the comments that are coming in, and do keep your questions and comments coming. So Elaine says, in our company, we don't have separate change managers. Our BAs and PMs work together to manage the change from start to finish, requirements to measuring KPIs at the end, including all the readiness. That's a really interesting, sounds like a very joined up way of doing it. And I suppose that that links to another topic, Jenn, which is, it sounds like, done well, change management is also linked to benefits management, because if change management involves ensuring the change is adopted, then it follows that actually measuring the benefits is part of that role. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if we think about it, again, we're going back to what is the goal of the project.
Yeah. So
what is you're starting from the beginning, what is our success criteria? What can we measure to know that we've done this well? So that's where you're going to look at those benefits on the other end, right? And what is being measured is what's going to tell you how successful you are.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing we've sort of touched on is the similarities and differences between business analysis and change management and change managers. I suppose another thing people might be wondering is can there be conflict between the two disciplines? I'm sure the answer is yes, because
let's go ahead.
Yeah, but also, like, what sort of areas can the collaboration really work? And I wondered whether you had any examples of that sort of collaborative approach between business analysis and change management.
So I want to step back a little bit, about maybe 20 years, and think about project management and business analysis.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That was brutal. It's still a bit brutal sometimes, but
at times. But we came to a point where we navigated through that, and we figured out who does what. Yeah. There's still a little bit of there's still overlap. The project manager I'm working with now, there's a bit of overlap, but I'm relying on her for what she's bringing, and then I'm bringing that other perspective. We still have the project manager wants to get the project done in time, and the business analyst wants to make sure it's the right project.
Yeah.
Right? Well, now this change manager is coming in and saying they want to make sure that not only is it the right project, but that it is meeting the benefits that we were hoping it would meet or we were planning to meet.
Yeah, yeah. So actually a really, I'm kind of imagining like a triangle with the different roles, sort of, and having that overlap, but actually they're more powerful together. Like they reinforce each other, because you've got, I suppose, the why. The why connects the business analyst and the change manager, and to some extent the project manager. But the project manager will often be very interested in the how and the when, and the how much. And the change manager is interested in the how much is actually delivered. like how okay, not how much is spent, but how much is actually delivered. So slightly different perspectives on, slightly different lenses on change, perhaps.
Yeah, and the change manager is bringing in that extra element too, where the project manager and business analyst might be focused on, okay, we are making these paper documents electronic now, so we're going to focus on what do we need, what needs to be collected, what still needs to be on the form. So we're focusing on that piece of it so that we can deliver an electronic document. The change manager is saying, what other processes are going to need to change, right? And I say the change manager is thinking that, but as a business analyst, I am as well, and that's where the overlap is.
Yeah.
But they're also looking at, do we need to change how, do we need to change how we order paper? Do we need to change the location of the pens? I don't know, I'm grasping.
Yeah.
But they're looking at things beyond the project.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? And as an aside, like I remember, often those things that sound really simple, like we're gonna have a rebrand, so that's really simple, isn't it? Well, not. It's actually not simple, because you're going to have to change every logo on every website, on every piece of paper, on every pre-printed form, on every dynamic form that you have. Oh, and by the way, every footer of every single piece of literature now has to change as well. And you probably know, if you're like most organizations, you've got no catalog of where all of those things are. So, so that collaboration, so powerful. So we have a question from Jason, who asks, what benefit do you think that well-defined business architecture brings to smoother change management? That's a great question. These are all great questions.
These are great questions. These are above my pay grade. I think that the business architecture, I think it's a dream for a business analyst as well as for a change manager. If that business architecture is well defined, who's going to be impacted. You've got a pretty good idea how they're impacted. You know where their direction is coming from. You know how everyone works together. So you know how a change here, I guess knowing where that change could be impacted, it's going to help with your stakeholder analysis. It's going to make those initial pieces so much easier to get the change manager in there, understanding the culture, and be able to run from there.
Yeah, I mean, even just one element, like even if you just think about the process architecture, like having a well-defined set of business processes that are actually representative of what the business actually does, which sounds like it should be normal, but is not always the case. We've probably all found. But like if you've got a set of defined business processes, like it's far easier to work out, like impact analysis is possible. You can do it on paper before you do it in the organization. And yet so often I don't know if you find this, Jen, but it sort of feels like where there's no or little in some organizations understanding of the business architecture, it's kind of like, well, let's pull this plug out and see if anyone screams. Like, let's just hope this doesn't, like, let's hope this isn't the, the sort of cooling control for the nuclear power plant type of thing, I mean, I jest, but it's kind of a bit trial and error sometimes, isn't it? Without that architectural understanding, I suppose.
Yeah, well, and you're more or less doing the work twice, right? Because first you're having to define your current state, and it's going to be a lot harder to define it before you can identify what the future is going to be.
Yeah. So we have a question from Steve. Steve says, in agile projects, should the product owner be responsible for identifying the deliverables to aid the change managers and BAs for each release, or should it be someone else?
I think it's a little of everyone, but your product owner is the one who is out there working directly. Well, maybe it's the product manager, but they're out there working with more directly, I guess, with the change that's coming and understanding what those impacts could be. So they're more likely to be the ones identifying what those impacts are. But I think it's between them and your business owner and your product manager, and it's a little of everyone, much like everything else in Agile.
Yeah. And sometimes maybe as BAs we might ask provocative questions of the product owner to sort of nudge them to think about these things, because if they're under pressure to get stuff out the door, which a lot of product owners are, it might not be front of their mind. So we can help them by saying, yeah, that's important, and how about we have a conversation about this and
right.
that and so on. So Jenn, you've talked about ADKAR, and we had that great list of techniques that someone put into the chat. But I wondered, what other sorts of tools and techniques have you come across that are shared, particularly ones that are shared by both disciplines, so BAs and change managers, the sort of ones that could potentially help us save time?
In terms of, I guess overall having an understanding about what each other does.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I guess tools, techniques, is that what you're kind of looking at?
Yeah.
So we talked about stakeholder analysis, the interview, I think we talked interviews, focus groups. Again, a lot of we can share the information that we pull from those different sessions that we've had. And I think just kind of going back again to the previous question on product owner, the business analyst and or product owner, not only are they looking at what needs to be delivered in the solution, but they're looking at the why behind it as well. So that why is then going to feed into the change manager, who can take that and say, okay, now we understand the why. They can better, I guess, focus on that why to make sure that the message is being delivered clearly to everybody.
Yeah, it comes back, so much of what we do as change practitioners comes back to that why, doesn't it? And, I'm sure you and I, and probably many people listening into this, have been on projects where that why is not well defined. And so what happens is the project pulls itself apart, because, well, with no goal, it's everyone's goal. Like, anyone could, if there's no internal consistency between why the thing's happening, then it stalls. So I suppose one thing that we can all, whatever our discipline is, take away is crystallizing that why, and then working with others to make sure that those who are impacted by the what and the how also understand the why. So the person because people see the how, right, don't they? The people see you're taking my paper forms away. And if we're able to help them understand, well, the paper forms are going away because that's a saving of X million dollars a year, which means that your job is now much more secure, or whatever it happens to be, then
Right.
maybe it's about, and I'm thinking off the top of my head here, which is really
Yeah.
dangerous, but maybe it's the glue. Maybe part of it is the glue that sticks the why, what, and how together, and the how much and the when and that kind of thing. Or am I off on one here, Jen?
No, this is awesome, because as you're saying that, I'm going back to that question that came in earlier about what if nobody's interested in engaging change management. That alone, like being able to articulate that why, and if the change coming in happens to be, I don't know, GDPR,
Yeah.
something huge that you don't have a choice in, understanding the why is going to make people that much more engaged and interested in learning more about it.
Yeah.
So if you knew why that person took your seat, you might not have been so upset.
Yeah, well, I probably would have been, but yeah, I mean, I've told this story before, probably on these webinars, but I remember once I was working in it was like a change in a contact center, so like a call center environment where they also handled incoming correspondence, and people had post trays. This was back in the day where there were post trays, right? Physical post trays. And some people had 3 and some people had 2. And there was like a office standardization process that said, right, everyone's going to have 2 now, right? And it caused huge dissatisfaction. And I was there thinking, I just don't understand why people are being so weird about a post tray. And it was only when I spoke to some people who said, the thing is, you need to understand, Adrian, before a certain date, if you joined, you got 3 post trays. After that date, you only got 2. So the 3 post trays was seen as like a symbol of seniority, right? Because if you're a 3 post tray person, you'd been there longer, and you were and by implication were treated and seen as more senior than someone who had 2 post trays. And once you understand dynamics like that, you think, okay, it still seems a bit weird to me, but I can kind of understand, because they're giving away a status symbol in their heads.
Right.
So
right.
I guess it's about understanding. Again, we come back to like psychology and human nature again. It's like,
yeah. I think one of the best, there were 2 big change campaigns that stick out in my life, in earlier in my career, before I even knew what change management was. And one of them was the company that I was working for was moving from a 7.5-hour workday to an 8-hour workday.
Okay.
And there was no change in compensation.
That's a hard sell.
Yes. So it started by, it kind of got leaked. And there were rumblings about it for a couple of weeks where people were talking, did you hear about this? Did you hear about this? Do you know that that's taking away 3 weeks of our vacation if you add up all those hours? And some people were upset about it, but we had time to digest before there was a formal announcement. And then the formal announcement came out. They called it the professional work week. And they had us all in the lobby, and they explained this whole thing and how we're all professionals and this shows our professionalism, and and just the way that it was delivered, I walked away from there wanting to do an 8-hour workday.
Wow.
So there's definitely a psychology.
Some good comms. Yeah, some good comms.
Yeah.
But, great. So we'll pick up another couple of comments and questions, then we'll start to draw this to a conclusion. Again, apologies if we don't get every question answered. Stefan says, understanding the why is described in business requirements according to the BA book, which of course, Jen, you have behind you, as every good business analyst would have there on the bookshelf. Nonetheless, many BAs are rarely concerned about the why, where it's one of the first questions that should be asked with a change initiative. How do you feel and think about this? I think we would both, well, I can't speak for Jen, but I wholeheartedly agree. But then I know Stefan very well, and I wholeheartedly agree with just about everything he says. So, but I'm sure you would agree with that as well, Jen.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, when I'm talking to somebody about business analysis, they're interested in getting into business analysis. A lot of what I talk about is you've got to ask why. You've got
Yeah.
to understand the why behind it. I'll say to people, what's the most important part of your requirement? What's the most important part of a user story?
Yeah.
It's not the as a user, right?
So that it's the
So that.
Yeah, yeah. The so that
Yeah.
is the real requirement in my. But I'm on a losing streak with that one. But
But see, I've seen people say sometimes you have to shift the so that, move that further up.
well, so okay. So we should do another session on this, because I find I iterate when I write user stories, that you kind of find the so that does become the middle bit, and then you find the real so that, and but then
Are you doing
rarely
five whys?
Yeah, can't it? Right, exactly right. See, so but because you got to, often people will ask for something that's a solution, and you have to kind of, even if it's a story level, I think you have to say, okay, yeah, but I don't think you really just want I know this is a cliche, but I don't think you really just want a new field on the database, right? There's a reason why, what you're wanting is the ability to make a decision, and you want some information to make that decision, but a new field on the database is one way, and there might be others. So that kind of iteration is important. But yeah, 5 whys, as you say, Jen. And so,
well, yeah, just on that same topic, I did have one of my favorite stories to tell was, and this comes back into change management as well, because when we're doing our requirements elicitation and we're working through our requirements and we're speaking to our stakeholders, we're constantly pushing that message out there, right? And them understanding the why and everything. I had a stakeholder say, in this new system, I needed to have the wizard functionality. And I said, okay, why? Why do you need the wizard functionality? Well, because we have it in the other system. Okay, well, what are you using it for? Tell me a little bit more about how it's used. Well, it asks questions so that so people are entering the right information in their ticket. Okay, so let's go. And in the end, we wrote the requirement as I need the system to guide the user through the creation of the ticket so that they have all the information that's required. So in the end, they implemented the wizard functionality, but that's besides the point.
at least it wasn't like Mr. Clippy from Word 97 or whatever. Do you remember that irritating paperclip? I mean,
He's making a comeback.
but can you imagine, like, if it was like, well, we had it in the last version, so so we've got to have that awful. And every time you would write, it would try and, I think you're writing a letter. No, I'm not. Leave me alone. Just trying to get some work done. Vikesh asks, again, another really, really useful question, which is, do you think the why is being killed because of the death of good business cases? Most places I've been ignore the business case or rush it, which is, again, really, really good point.
I always push back. So if the business case is not well defined, again, another project I started on, I'm going into it and I had an idea of why we're doing this, but I didn't know if it was real. And anybody I asked said, well, I don't really know.
Yeah.
So I went to the sponsor and I said, okay, what are your top? Okay, here's what I think the top 3 objectives are. Am I correct? Right? Because nobody could articulate them to me. So I made them up and then had them validated.
Yeah.
Business case or not, I think as business analysts, we've got to.
It's great, Jen, because one of the things I've done something similar where I've spoken to different stakeholders and said, tell me what your view on what this thing is for, and not what it's doing, but what it's for. And then I've played it back to them all, and then gone to the sponsor and said, just so you know, all of your people, I haven't said it quite this bluntly, but just so you know, all of your people think you're doing this for a different reason. So would you mind if I held a workshop to actually get some coherence and consistency here? Again, I would never say it that bluntly, right? Because you've got to do it with rapport. But I found that if you bring that to someone senior and say, look, I was just doing a bit of conversations, and I'm worried because this could go off the rails for you, and here's how I can help. And then what I like to do, I mean, I'm a real fan of problem statements and an outcome. So I'll write a problem statement and a set of outcomes, which then slot very neatly in. They're not a business case, but they can slot very neatly into a business case. But yeah, so
that situation you just described, Adrian, brings us full circle, because if you have a change manager on the project, you know, one of the first thing they're doing is making sure leadership is aligned on what is the why, what is the purpose of this, what are the expected outcomes, and they're getting that message out there. So by the time you as a business analyst ask your stakeholders, they are all on the same page, because that snowplow has already gone by.
Yeah. Steve's just added, telling a director that their product is deficient, that gets you attention, and that gets noticed. So that's interesting. I'm not sure I'm that brave, but
it
thank
gets
you.
Something.
So Marsha, just very briefly, Marsha just adds a comment: change management, change control board, change management, organization change management, business analysis. These also confuse people as well. And yeah, I mean, there's just so many change practitioners in the pot, isn't there? But Jen, we're coming towards the end. So very, very briefly, if you were to have a top tip or takeaway that you want people tuned in to take away from our conversation today, what would that top tip be?
I would say that, and we've said it already today, we're all working toward the same project, toward the same goal. So business analysts and change managers, it's essential that they collaborate, they work closely together, share that information, and move along that project together.
Yeah.
And also, quick little plug in for the Association of Change Management Professionals, the ACMP. Lots of great resources on there on best practices in change management.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, your organization, you mentioned, runs a course on these sorts of topics, so people should check that out, of course, as well.
Yep, absolutely. Mariner Innovations is the company that I do work for, and there is a 3-day course aligned with the ACMP.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Jen, I'm sure, and if you are watching live, do stay on the line, because I've got just a couple of things to mention to you all before you log off. But I am absolutely certain people want to stay in touch. They'll want to follow you. I'll also bring in a question from Vince.
Vince who? I don't know anybody named Vince.
No. So Vince asks, what is serendipity, and will Jen be there? So Jen, how can people stay in touch with you, and what is serendipity, and will you be there?
So definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. Jennifer Bedell on LinkedIn. I'm friends with Adrian. I'm friends with this other guy named Vince. I will be speaking at this awesome conference called Serendipity on the 15th of July. My topic will be on slowing down, something that we all need to, well, we've done a lot of in the last year, but slowing down our minds.
Yeah. Fantastic. So people, and I've just put your LinkedIn link in the chat. So if you're watching this on Zoom, click through and connect with Jen. And if people have got thoughts, are you happy for them to connect with you afterwards and ask questions and share their thoughts with you?
Absolutely. I love this stuff.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, Jen, I'm sorry, I am going to have to share the mural, but I've just seen out the corner in my eye something on the I've got to share this now. So I haven't.
I'm going to grab a screenshot.
The clippy needs to go away. It's like,
hang on, leave it right there while I grab a screenshot of that, will you?
It's like, it's just. This is, I mean, so Jen, thank you so much, right? Because you can see by the number of sticky notes and the number of questions we've had, this is a topic that people have really enjoyed. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here and share your knowledge today. A massive thank you to everyone who has tuned in live, and indeed, if you're watching the recording. I do just want to make a few announcements before we close. So first of all, on the 3rd of June, which is in just 2 days' time, there is the BA Open Mic. That's at 6:30 UK time, which is 1:30 Eastern time. 7:30 p.m. Central European and South African Standard Time. That's pretty much your opportunity to come in, chill out. It's not recorded. It's, you can take 3 minutes on stage on a topic of your choice, or you can just listen to others, and kind of a bit of a social event. So more of a sort of interactive social event, as always, completely free to attend. The next, or sort of regular style webinar, is on the 29th of June with Rachel Drinkwater. Many of you will be familiar with her work. She writes some awesome stuff, speaks on all sorts of topics. That's on the power to change the digital world, business analysis, empathy and ethics. Which is interesting, right? Because, maybe we should be thinking more about it's definitely empathy, but then the sort of ethics of the changes that we do. And then, of course, Serendipity, and I'll put a link to all of these in the chat, is on the 15th of July. It is a half-day conference, a half-day festival. If you think about what you would pay for a half-day festival or event, it's nowhere near as much as that. It's completely free. So if you are tuned in and you are a manager of BAs, I would ask whether you could consider giving your people some time off to perhaps participate, because it's free learning for them, free networking, and of course, if you're even if you're not a manager of BAs, come along. It's absolutely everyone, even if you're not a BA, right? It's interdisciplinary. It's about change, and really for all change practitioners. So do click on that link, register, and come along to that. There's a lot of networking and great speakers like Jenn there as well. But that brings us bang on schedule at an hour to say, finally, again, thanks again, Jenn. So, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And I'm sure thanks to everyone for watching, and see you all again soon. And stay safe.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.